They're gonna kill the love of my life. Casey! If I don't go back to what I was doing.
On February 24th.
Our line of work is quite brutal and quite ruthless.
How far would you go for love?
You steal truck, bring it to me. Then you make your money.
Is it dangerous?
Of course it's dangerous!
Nicholas Hoult, Felicity Jones, with Ben Kingsley and Anthony Hopkins.
All this trouble, all this pain, for love.
Collide. In theaters February 24th. Rated PG-13. May be inappropriate for children under 13. See.
In the latest example of Syria's violent war spilling past that country's borders, the Russian ambassador to Turkey was assassinated by a lone gunman while delivering a speech at a museum in the Turkish capital of Ankara. Police sources tell NBC News the gunman was Turkish, a 22-year-old officer in the Ankara Special Forces. According to witnesses, the gunman yelled out, "Don't forget Aleppo, don't forget Syria," wounding 3 additional people before being fatally shot by police.
Back on the Bernie and Sid show on 77 WABC. That was that Rachel Maddow-looking dweeb on MSNBC, ignoring the fact that the gunman screamed out, "Allahu Akbar."
That's huge.
And this is for the jihad.
That's huge.
Why would they do that, Sid?
I don't know.
Why do you think?
What
do we suppose? Why are they such apologists for terrorists, trying to cover up for terrorists? Why is that?
Sounds a little bit like, I don't know, this administration?
But it just doesn't make any sense.
Well, of course
is it because is it because we hate America? We know ISIS hates America, so the enemy of my enemy is my friend? Is it that kind of mentality?
I wish it was.
Why do they do that?
Well, I don't know. They're crazy.
Yeah, they are sick in the
They
head.
are sick.
But they do. I have to think my aforementioned theory, in the absence of any other plausible explanation, applies.
Well, the president has long warned us not to hate all Muslims and be nice and blah, blah, blah. And whether that's MSNBC or CNN, they're just advancing his rhetoric. That's all. And that's what you've got. You've got a bunch of apologists and folks that are scared to tell the truth. Unlike our next guest, who lives in Berlin, Germany, although he is this morning in Jerusalem. He's a wonderful writer for the Jerusalem Post. He also works for he's a foundation for Democrats, for democracies. Guys like Jonathan Shanzer and those guys, all very impressive individuals. He works with those guys, too. Let me give you the exact. It's the fellow, he's a fellow at Foundation for Defense of Democracies. He's become a very good friend over the years. Live from Jerusalem, it's Benjamin Weinthal. Ben, it's Bernie and Sid back in New York. How are you, pal?
Hey, Ben.
Good. Great to be on your show, Bernie and Sid.
Great to have you. Hey, let's start with this. You live in Berlin. I would imagine you live very, very close to the market, the Christmas market, where this tragedy took place yesterday. At first, they said they caught the guy, a Pakistan refugee. He was aggravated because Merkel wouldn't allow him to come into Germany, and this is how he was getting his revenge. Now, today, they're saying there's a manhunt. Do they have the guy or not?
Well, it's unclear. You're right. I live about 10 minutes from the Christmas market, which is in the center of a large bustling shopping district. I've been there, I don't know, a few hundred times. And they arrested a Pakistani, Naved B, 23-year-old, but it's unclear whether he's the only suspect or there might be more suspects. The federal prosecutor in Germany just announced that there may be more suspects. So it's unclear. There's been some news items that there is another suspect on the loose who's armed, but there's not a lot of concrete information coming out. What we know is there are 12 dead people, 50 injured. 2 Israelis are injured, by the way. They're in the hospital right now. I haven't seen any reports about Americans. And this type of truck jihad or vehicular jihad continues to take place. In France over the summer, 86 people were killed by a radical Tunisian Islamist. And now it looks like we have another radical animated Islam attack in the heart of Berlin.
And Benjamin Bernard here. Listen, thank you for appearing on the show here. Angela Merkel infamously let in 1 million Middle Eastern refugees a year ago, inexplicably. And, of course, which led to Brexit and may signal the downfall of the EU, all these open border stuff. And the headline on Drudge today, Angela Merkel, blood on her hands. How accurate is that? How much has that played a part in this?
Well, she vastly underestimated the terror threat among this influx of refugees and migrants and immigrants from Muslim-majority countries. There were 2 terrorist attacks earlier this year in Germany, in Bavaria, on a train and a market. First time a suicide bomber took place at this market in Bavaria. So there are huge gaps in Germany's counterterrorism apparatus, and Merkel has, in my view, made some major mistakes. I mean, there's nothing wrong with allowing refugees in from countries where there's political persecution, but to allow, as you pointed out, Bernie, nearly 1 million refugees in an unfettered way without any serious vetting is, in my view, a danger for German society and Europe and America.
You know,
there's a lot of Americans who also live in Germany.
And we talked last, nobody died in those 2 prior attacks you talked about in Germany, but of course, many died yesterday. But you and I talked last year. You came on my show in Florida. I'll never forget it, because the day before, Time magazine, which this year gave Donald Trump the Person of the Year, last year gave it to Angela Merkel. And I remember you coming on the show, and I said to you, how do you folks in Germany feel about that? And even then, at the very beginning of this whole process, you were saying, well, I'm looking outside my apartment right now, and there's about 10,000 refugees spilling into the street. We're not so happy about that.
Right. There's a lot of discontent in Germany right now among ordinary Germans about Merkel's policies. And we'll see how that plays out. This year's an election year, next year, 2017. And she's going to have a difficult time because there's some serious opposition. And if this turns out to be a coordinated jihadi attack, and that's what it looks like right now, she's going to take a real beating in the election, I suspect.
And until, of course, the carnage begins, your opposition to Muslim refugees is characterized as bigoted and et cetera, et cetera. You're just a troglodyte. Until the carnage begins, then you're a visionary. Then all of a sudden, hey, you know what? Maybe that guy was right. But let's segue, if we would, Ben. Benjamin Weinthal from he's in Israel right now, lives in Germany. You had that awful attack yesterday on the Russian diplomat in Ankara, Turkey, by the man who screamed out, Allahu Akbar, this is for the jihad. The whole thing behind that, we were talking earlier, Sid and I, is that Turkey is essentially a Sunni nation, and they oppose what the Russians and the Syrians are doing to the rebels in Aleppo, because the Syrians, of course, are Shiites. So my thesis is that it all boils down to one big civil war there, the Sunnis versus the Shiites. What do you say, Benjamin?
Yes, it's become sectarian in many ways, and I think one major problem associated with this civil war is Obama allowed a vacuum to exist in the Middle East. That's why the Israelis view this administration view the Obama administration as not having much credibility. And what's happened is Obama subcontracted U.S. foreign policy to Putin, the Iranians, all these different groups that are not friends of the U.S., and this is going to be a huge problem. So the main danger right now is Iran. Iran is a Shiite state, as you mentioned, and they're aligning with Syria, a Shiite regime, and they've come to dominate that part of the Islamic heartland. And Iran is the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism, according to this administration, the U.S. administration. So Trump's going to have a huge problem on his hands, largely because of Obama's impotence and feebleness in the Middle East.
Let's stay right there. Benjamin Weinthal, Jerusalem Post, lives in Berlin, but in Jerusalem this morning. I know you do work at Foundation for Defense of Democracies. John Shanzer, very adamant about the Iran deal. You and I have talked about that as well. I did see Netanyahu on 60 Minutes last week talking about how he and Donald Trump are going to figure out a way, despite the other European nations, what they feel, they're going to figure out a way to rip up this Iran deal. Now, you have written many columns, Ben, over the last year, pointing out where Iran has absolutely gone back on this deal, whether it's collecting arms or doing things they're not supposed to do. So 2 things confirm for us that, yes, you have found instances where Iran has not kept up their end of the bargain. And secondly, do you think that Netanyahu and Donald Trump will rip up this awful Iran deal?
Well, you're right, Sid. We discussed this, and just this year, the Wall Street Journal and my research also showed that Iran violated the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the Iran nuclear deal, which wasn't signed, by the way, by the U.S. government. And Iran sought nuclear weapons technology in Germany. There's a whole series of German intelligence reports from this year that establish that, and I would add biological and chemical weapons technology. I just wrote about this for Forbes. So that's one aspect of the ongoing violations and Obama's refusal to aggressively enforce the deal. In fact, Obama and Kerry are sort of serving as Iran's Chamber of Commerce and granting more concessions to Iran so that they can preserve their legacy with this deeply flawed Iran deal, which is a great danger for the U.S. and Western countries as well as in the Middle East and, of course, Israel. The second question about Bibi Netanyahu, Israel's prime minister, and Donald Trump. Trump said it's the worst deal in the history of American foreign policy, or the most lopsided deal, and he's wavered between scrapping the deal and wanting to renegotiate it. I think the thinking now is, and I may be wrong, but the thinking is the Israeli government wants to renegotiate the deal and aggressively enforce it because Obama provided over $100 billion to the Iranians up front. He front-ended the Iran deal. So they've secured all of their money to wage terrorism in the Middle East and across the globe. And the only thing you could do right now is really enforce the deal to make sure they don't go for a nuclear weapons device within the next few years. I suspect they might have a device within the next 10 years unless Trump begins to renegotiate the deal.
That's very interesting, Benjamin Weinthal from the Jerusalem Post. It's very complicated. As you just pointed out, Iran already got the money that they wanted for this. And also this deal, we signed it with Great Britain, Russia, France, and others. So it's kind of like putting toothpaste back in the tube. And one of the benefits of this deal is that we have a contract with Iran now, with Boeing, that may provide us with 100,000 jobs, which if we unilaterally drop out of the deal, one of these European countries will get that contract and will lose the benefit after having already given Iran the money.
Yeah, I mean, the toothpaste out of the tube is an apt way to describe this deal in terms of the money we sent over. The Boeing deal, I think, is very risky, and there are Republicans and some Democrats who oppose the deal in Congress. We'll see how Trump proceeds with that, because those Boeing jets or airplanes can be used, as Iran is currently doing with its Air Force, its airplanes to send weapons and missiles and other types of cash to Syria. Syria is an opponent or an enemy of Israel and also the West. So those planes could end up advancing aerial terrorism for Iran across the Middle East.
But one of those other countries will then get the contract and supply those planes in any case.
Right.
And we will lose out on the jobs, and they will still get the planes, essentially.
Well, yeah, that's the question, whether the Trump administration will impose sanctions then on those countries, for example, the Europeans who want to sell Airbus planes, as you point out, to the Iranians and prevent all sales of airplanes to Iran until it stops its aerial terrorism and its terrorism on the ground. So I think you need to beef up the sanctions to punish the Europeans and also prevent American companies from selling this type of sophisticated technology to, again, the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism, according to the U.S. government.
All right, 60 seconds to go. We know you're in Jerusalem this morning. Long Island kid made good, the new ambassador to Israel. What about David Friedman? What do you think?
I think he's great. This is someone who's well versed in Israeli politics. The liberal media, both in the U.S. and Israel, are in a state of mass hysteria over this selection of David Friedman. His father was a rabbi. He's been dealing with Middle East issues for decades. And yes, the Bibi administration, the Israeli government, is to the left of this newly appointed ambassador, but I think he'll bring a fresh perspective, a fresh set of eyes, and fresh ideas to the region that's desperately in need of this type of energy.
Absolutely. He wants to move the embassy to Jerusalem. He's against the two-state solution. That's all good. Listen, but we do have to go, Benjamin. My old friend Tom Rose used to write for the Jerusalem Post, an Indiana boy himself. Have you heard from him recently?
I haven't, but the paper's open to op-eds. I can, after the show, send you the name of the op-ed editor, Seth Franzman. We love getting submissions from the U.S. So we're wide open.
Listen, Merry Christmas. Let me check that. Happy Hanukkah, Benjamin Weinthal from
Yes.
the Jerusalem Post. Thanks for appearing on Bernie and Sid.
Great job as always, Ben. Great to talk to you. God bless you and the best of this holiday season. Okay, pal?
Thanks, guys. Happy holidays, and to your listeners.
You too.
Thanks
You
a
too.
lot, man. Bernie and Sid back after this.
They're gonna kill the love of my life. If I don't go back to what I was doing.
On February 24th,
Our line of work is quite brutal and quite ruthless.
how far would you go for love?
You steal truck, bring it to me. Then you make your money.
Is it dangerous?
Of course it's dangerous.
Nicholas Holt, Felicity Jones, with Ben Kingsley and Anthony Hopkins.
All this trouble, all this pain for love.
Collide in theaters February 24th. Rated PG-13. May be inappropriate for children under 13.